Hello again. My name's Jason Davis, and I'm a distinguished engineer with Cisco, and I'm part of our Customer Experience Services Department. And I get the opportunity to talk to you today about the Cisco Live NOC. This is a wonderful place for us to work in as Cisco employees, to serve you, to build this network in ways that delight you, hopefully, and allow the speakers to do the best thing that they can do across this venue. First thing we have to think about when we're designing this network are what are the functional requirements. So one of the first things we do is find out how many sessions are going to be recorded and how many keynotes they're going to happen. And things like this Master Series Studio, these are new things that we're being offered. And so we have to think about how we connect all this equipment up, what kind of switches we need, what kind of routing is going to happen, the wireless networking. And once we understand all the requirements, we try to think about providing a highly available, seamless mobile experience for you. We also need to recognize that we have to be able to rapidly execute configuration management at any time. We need to be able to change any switch, any port, any access point at any time. There are no maintenance windows. We just make changes whenever they're necessary. We also pride ourselves on thinking about providing high levels of visibility into the data that we collect. And we do that in the NOC area, where you can see digital signage that represents the same tools that we're using in our work area in the back. You can see the faults, you can see the metrics, and then we're also spending time tweeting out some of that information. And if you're interested, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm known as SNMP Guy. We also are concerned about the security of your data, and we try to protect your privacy and security as much as possible. When we see problems on the network, we try to find you and let you know if you have been compromised in a botnet or crypto mining attack, and let you know that you need to work on remediating your device. We also want to make sure that these systems are intuitive for managing our environment, because not everybody uses the same tools all year long. Some of these people are some of these people are volunteers that help us out at any number of times through the year, and they don't use every tool at the same time in their regular job. We want to make sure that we're providing nonstop high performance for all show hours. And then after hours, we kick back a bit, and that's kind of fun. After we've selected the hardware and software, we have to think about the mapping of the functionality to how we need to monitor this environment. Sometimes we think about what SNMP telemetry might be available, if there's streaming telemetry options, if there are sensors, if we can use some new capabilities like netconf or REST, or if we have to fall back to doing CLI scraping through SSH connections. We also ask the question, how often do we need to pull this data? How often do we need to see it? Is it interesting if we gather it more frequently, or is it okay if we take a longer time frame to gather it? Another good question is, who's using this information? If it's a technical person, it may need to be portrayed in one way, but if it's an executive, we may need to be able to show it in another way that abstracts the information a bit more, or prettifies it, if you will. And how do they want that information? A dashboard, an email, a WebEx Teams message, maybe a PDF, or in some cases, we've actually provided APIs for other exhibitors to get access from us. And we have to do that in a secure way and a scalable way. How long does that information need to be gathered and maintained is another good question. And can we glean new pieces of information when we mash up the data from multiple sources? And what do I mean by that? Well, if I have data that's in prime infrastructure and different types of data that's in DNA center, can I bring those together and get new insights out of that? Different sources of information provide new insights. Now, another question is, how long does it take to implement this? And if it takes too long, we don't have the time. We only have a few days to get set up before the event. And do we have the appropriate security, privacy, and performance expectations of ourselves that you have for us also? Now, we all know that we need to be ready by registration open. Nobody wants to get into a registration queue and find out that there are hundreds of people waiting to get their badges and you can't move because nobody's able to get a badge printed out. Those days, hopefully, are long behind us. The earliest parts of the event are focused on setup, obviously. Now, what you can see here, a little calendar, July 2020, the 20th and 21st were travel days for most people. I left Raleigh, North Carolina, where I live in the United States, on Monday the 20th, and I got here on the 21st, which was Tuesday. Started working. Pretty much Wednesday, the 22nd, was when everybody was here, and we're starting to roll out the equipment, the switches to the different rooms. We're making sure access points that are needed in different areas to be filled in are put out there. And then by Saturday, we hopefully have the network up and running in a production way so that on Sunday, when registration opens, you guys are able to have a good experience. And then Monday, the 27th, we kicked off, and the network was ready to go. And hopefully you've been enjoying the experience that we provided for you. I want to share a video with you what this environment that the FIRA venue looked like before everything was done. So let's roll the video. So here I am walking through the back area at faster speed. In the IT management, they have these signs that would blink when you walked by. That was kind of neat. And then there was this coffee area that hadn't been finished, and the guys were working on a seating area. There's a lot of forklifts and other types of lifts that are out there. You got to be careful. People working on the different booths. The walk-in self-paced clinic over there, getting their screens all installed. Here's our NOC area without the screens or any of the computers driving the monitors. And then we're walking up to the Cisco studio and over to where the social media hub is, the umbrella area, and then the Cisco store. And you'll notice they got all their 18 cameras there. This guy's working on this scissor lift and working on the lights. And then as I walk through the hallway between the halls here, you see where the water streaming is. That would eventually become that water curtain. Now I'm going into the World of Solutions, which initially just said World of Solution, and somebody noticed they were missing an S on that sign, so we had to work on that. And there's a lot of containers all over the place with sound equipment, lighting equipment, people wearing high visibility vests to make sure they don't get run over by forklifts, or people driving by really quickly on scooters like Remco and Paul just running by on a scooter there. And a lot of people are using scooters to get through this venue, going from end to end. We're talking millions of square feet of conference center space. And as we approach the back here, this is the Cisco Pavilion. And you can see we did not have carpet. We didn't have the booths done. We didn't have any of the screens, really. And this is where we take the environment from bare floor up to what you see now. And it's been really transformative to see in the last few days. Now here is the network diagram of what we eventually built for you. And what you can see at the top is the venue, the FIRA venues acting as the service provider, providing BGP connectivity to our core routers, which were ASR 1002HXs. We had dual 10 gig connections to this venue, right? We had multiple 100 gig connections down to our own layer 3 core, which were also 9500 Catalyst 9500s with quad 100 gig connections into the data centers. There was a data center below Hall 2, another data center below Hall 6 and 7. In each of those data centers, we had another set of 9500s that acted as the wireless network aggregation switch. We had 3 DNA center appliances in each one. We had 4 wireless LAN controllers in each one of those also. Below that are the MDFs. These are, again, Catalyst 9500s, and these provide the aggregation points for all the smaller Catalyst 3560 switches that became connection points for access points, digital signage, and the different classrooms where people were. And again, here are the equipment types and the quantities that we used. ASR 1002s, again, dual 10 gig connections to the internet. Catalyst 9500s for our core and aggregation. Nexus 9336s for data center access. And a lot more of the Catalyst 95s and 93s for MDF access and high density access when we had rooms that needed more than a dozen or 2 connections. 8 wireless LAN controllers, over 800 wireless access points. We had 8 HyperFlex units 2 UCS minis, and our NetApp partner brought in Metro Cluster IP systems to provide 130 terabytes of storage for us, where we loaded all of our virtual machines, our management tools, things like network registrar, and then we also had a couple Raspberry Pis. The Raspberry Pis I set up to be GPS-enabled NTP time servers, and we put them by the windows in the venue, and they could see the satellites and get time signals from those satellites and provide good clocking through the rest of the network. We had a lot of software that we installed for this tool, for this NOC. Prime infrastructure, we had a couple of those systems. 6 instances of DNA Center. We had Cisco Action Orchestrator, which you may have seen me talk about yesterday. An Action Orchestrator provides automation and orchestration for us to glue together workflows, to talk to the different tools, to extract information, to make changes in the environment, and to create the dashboards that you had seen. And then we had various open source Linux distributions like Ubuntu and CentOS. And these operating systems provided jump servers and tools like Samplicators. We had various scripting and InfluxDB and Grafana and a fast ping utility called fping. And somebody asked me, what is a Samplicator? Well, a Samplicator is essentially a tool that takes in SNMP trap information, syslog event messaging, or NetFlow data and spreads it across the network. And why is that important? Well, if you have multiple tools that need that information, rather than setting trap, syslog, and NetFlow receivers on every device, you can send it to one target that's acting in a cluster and then have it spray that information across all the tools that need to consume that. We also used Ansible, and Ansible was a good tool to help us provision our data center equipment. And then we have a custom homegrown solution we call Cisco Live Automation Solution that was created by our very own Andrew Yurchenko. Thank you very much, Andrew. And that tool provided staging, planning, and configuration management for the equipment as it was distributed across the environment. Now, this dashboard shows us what's going on in the network, and while we have a lot of interesting graphs, RPM meters, thermometers, and things like that, we asked ourselves, could we show this information in a topological way? And so we laid this architecture out in PowerPoint and then decided it'd be great if we could find out what links are uploading and downloading traffic at different speeds. And we came up with a way that we could overlay that information dynamically on this PowerPoint and render it every 60 seconds. So if you go by the NOC, you'll see which uplink is pushing traffic, whether it's Core 1 or Core 2, and whether it's coming from the data center or coming from the wireless network. Obviously, we also have our own commercial tools, like Prime Infrastructure. And Prime Infrastructure has been a great tool for us over the years. It is a legacy management tool that does element management, configuration management, inventory, software image management, fault management, and performance management, bringing all that information together for low-end devices all the way to our highest tier service provider equipment. But as you may know, the days of traditional element management are starting to be short. And we are moving now towards distributed fabric type networks like SDA, software defined access. So we also had Cisco DNA Center installed, which was providing the configuration management, monitoring, and assurance for our SDA environment, which was in Hall 5. Hall 5 is where Meet the Engineer happened. So one area of this network was SDA. We also like to gather information about what's going on in the network, how much internet traffic is being passed. And I lovingly refer to this one as the Jerry Lewis Telethon dashboard. And what we're doing here is collecting SNMP metrics from each of the core routers and finding out how much of this is IPv4 traffic, how much of this is IPv6 traffic, how much of this is core 1, core 2, and then putting that into a nice dashboard with a time series representation so we can see when the peak activities were in the network, the low activities, and understand what the ratio and mix of IPv4 to IPv6 traffic was. This provided us some good insight. If you don't collect this kind of information, it's hard to make good business decisions about what you need to do in your environment. Now, it's not always about serious documentation and instrumentation. Sometimes it's about having a little bit of fun. And sometimes people don't understand because they may not be hardcore technologists. Well, what is a terabyte? What does that mean? I can't visualize that. So we spent some time. So if we were to take a terabyte and decide how much data is in the US Library of Congress, how much data if we were to digitize all of Beethoven's work or all of Shakespeare's work, or if we go back really old homeschool and say how much data would be on a 3.5-inch floppy disk, and we can do the math and do this dynamically and say that in this case 15 terabytes would be equal to 10 million 3.5-inch floppy disks. That makes me feel pretty old, to be honest, but also Blu-ray, DVDs, and CD-ROMs. So this is kind of a fun way for us to represent how much traffic we've moved through the network. Also, understanding the wireless protocol distribution and how much traffic is going on wirelessly. How many clients are connected to the network with your phone, your tablet, your laptop, and whether they're using some of the older technologies or they're using some of the newer wireless protocols. As you can see, Wi-Fi 6. And we had Wi-Fi 6, or also known as 802.11ax, on the 5 gig band was enabled. Here we're showing over 660 clients connected, and we had disabled the 2.4 band specifically. I was really encouraged to see this traffic because last summer at Cisco Live San Diego, we had less than 1% of the traffic was Wi-Fi 6. Here we are 6 months later, and we're up to 8.7%. And it's actually more than the Wi-Fi 4, which is 802.11n, combined. That is very interesting to me. That makes me think that the adoption of Wi-Fi 6 is going to be pretty fast, probably faster than the adoption of 802.11ac over time. The other thing that we were able to glean using automation and orchestration in the NOC was pulling data from Prime infrastructure and DNA Center and the wireless LAN controller all together. What were the clients connecting to from the SSIDs that we provide using the different wireless protocols? Now, funny story about this graph when we used it a couple years ago was that we had a user with a client device that was on 802.11g, but they were also connected to the IPv6 only wireless network. So we had to find this person and find out why they were doing this. For one reason, they were using 10-year-old radio technology, so they must have been very frugal. And the other thing was they were connected to the IPv6 only network, so they must have been very forward-thinking about network technology. So I wanted to meet this forward-thinking, frugal person and give them a new USB dongle to bring them 10 years into the future with wireless technology. We also collect access point client load. So the information in the back is, again, collected from Prime infrastructure, and we're using that orchestrator to gather all the access point information, all the radio information, and these access points may have 2 radios on them, and then all the client information. And all this is combined into a database, and then analytics are done on it, and then a dashboard is created to show us what the most heavily loaded access point radio is, and then we colorize them to make sure that we understand, this access point needs to be modified. Maybe the RF needs to be tweaked a bit, or we need to add another access point nearby to help with the load. And this is good information for us to have. We also have other tools that are collecting information about the core network and the data center network. how much network address translation tables are going on, ARP caches, network discovery for IPv6. These are consumable resources, and it's important for us to monitor, and I can tell you why. About 7 years ago, when we were at Cisco Live Las Vegas, we had an upstream service provider that knocked us off the internet, and we were no longer passing any traffic. And it took us a while to understand what was going on. And finally, after an unfortunate hour of troubleshooting, we realized we're not getting a routing table. It's supposed to be a huge routing table from the internet, but it's much smaller than what we expected. So what we ended up realizing is we need to monitor the size of our routing tables from the internet. And it's okay if we see a little bit of fluctuation, but if it drops pretty hard, then we need to know what's going on, and that's usually a trigger for us to start talking to our service provider to find out why we're losing routes. Collecting that information after we made the mistake the first time is important. None of us expects zero defects in our team members. We know we're going to make mistakes, but we want to learn from those mistakes. And I'm happy to say that this team is very anxious to do that, to learn things about monitoring routing tables, to monitoring IPv6 NDs, to make sure network address translation tables are being monitored and such. Another part of interesting information this showed us last summer at Cisco Live in San Diego was that we had a switch with a slow memory leak. We would not have seen that had we not been looking at this over a longer time period. And we realized, yes, it's a memory leak, but it's slow enough that we can go for the rest of the show without having to reboot that device and causing any issues. And that's what we ended up doing. But again, if you don't have that information, you don't know how to make a good decision. Now, we also have some fun with automation in the back. We have WebEx Teams, and we like to do what we call chat ops back there. So Joe Clark wrote this really cool automation that would allow you to talk to a bot that he put into the WebEx team room. And you could talk to the bot and say, Clive, get this IP address or get this MAC address. Now, that information or directed message to live bot would go back to WebEx Teams. They would do a webhook back to us at Cisco Live NOC, which would kick off some of our automations to look at the information for that IP address or that MAC address, looking through Prime Network Registrar, which is our DNS DHCP service, looking through Prime Infrastructure, or looking through DNA Center. And so what you're seeing here is the bot getting the information and pushing it back into WebEx Teams, which then pushed that message into the chat room. And now we have the perspective from 3 sources about who this device user is, where they're connected, what kind of device they are, IP address, what access point they're connected to, what wireless LAN controller is serving that access point, and other types of information. This is very useful to us when we're trying to troubleshoot an attendee's wireless problem. Now, another thing I believe is very important when we have a lot of tools is to try to bring that information together in a converged way. Now, these tools provide good insights into their niche areas, but as an IT manager, I'm more interested in knowing how my overall IT ecosystem is working. And so I want to combine information about my routers, my switches, my access point, compute, storage, my applications, my voice and video information and collaboration, the consumption of different consumables or KPIs, how much of my WAN bandwidth is being used. If I can bring that together, I know where to focus my energies, and these are important considerations for us to have as IT managers. So, what is it like to serve in the NOC? Well, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of long days, and even with all of the automation or orchestration we're using, there's a lot of work to do. So it takes a lot of people, and these people need to get along well, and I think we do in the NOC, so it's a great thing. Now, if you're like me and you're one of the network management operations focused people, you're going to get there early, and it's going to be pretty empty. it's going to be 6 or 7 in the morning, and you're doing the network readiness checks to make sure that the core routers are working, DNS services are working, the traffic that's being blocked, and access lists and firewalls are being blocked the way they're supposed to be, that the wireless LAN controllers are working, the digital signage and collectors are working fine, and it's pretty quiet in the morning until people start showing up. Usually by about 7:30, we start to see a big ramp of traffic coming into the network. Now you can also see that our team likes to have a little bit of fun. If you notice the DMZ tape that's on the left-hand side of that graphic, somebody decided when you cross this line, the demilitarized zone of this room, you need to check in equipment using your badge. And when you cross that line again, you need to check equipment out. So we can make sure that we have good control about our inventory when it's coming in and out of the room. So the DMZ was the visual reminder for people to know to badge scan when they cross that line and go into the storage room, which is off to the left-hand side there. Now, if you're on the wireless team, then you're very busy. You're sitting there building up all of your access points, you're putting them onto mounting brackets, probably stripping off some old tape from a previous event and putting new tape on it to identify the equipment. And these folks are installing what was about 110 access points in the environment. So there's a lot of equipment to be done in a short period of time. What I also enjoy being part of the NOC when we get here early is just walking through this tremendously large venue, and it's just empty. And you can see all these halls before the carpet gets laid down. And this is Hall 3, the keynote area, before they brought the screens up. And you can see that screens weren't even all functioning correctly because they had panels that were out. But it was interesting just to walk through, and I enjoy some of the audio-video technology to see the electrical connectivity. We've got to bring in big amperage connections and all the amps, all the switching equipment, and then eventually it turns into what you've seen. And on the back of the NOC, we have our NOC team face wall where we have pictures of each of our team members, and they share something about themselves, like what they do for Cisco regularly, what country they work for, and what their hobbies are. And I may not work with somebody who's on the wireless side or somebody that's on the security side all that often, but going here I can kind of get to know who they are. And this is the team that really makes it happen for us. So it does take a team. I'm proud to be part of that, but these are really the people that we should be thankful for, our Cisco Live 2020 NOC team members from all across Europe, some of us from the US, but all of us very devoted to providing you the best experience that you expect from Cisco. I thank you for your time. I thank you for the opportunity to serve you in the NOC, and I thank you for being a customer of Cisco. Have a wonderful day.